5. Joys and Passions.
In the previous discourse, we saw Zarathustra focus on the body as the true driving force. In Joys and Passions, he continues this discussion and connects it to another thread we saw him developing, the discussion about virtues.
My brother, when thou hast a virtue, and it is thine own virtue, thou hast it in common with no one. To be sure, thou wouldst call it by name and caress it, thou wouldst pull its ears and amuse thyself with it. And lo, then hast thou its name in common with the people, and hast thou become one of the people, and the herd, with thy virtue. Better for thee to say, Ineffable is it, and nameless, that which is pain and sweetness to my soul, and also the hunger of my bowels. Let thy virtue be too high for the familiarity of names, and if thou must speak of it, be not ashamed to stammer about it.
Zarathustra discusses the violent nature of language, preempting what the 20th century will say about it. Every word covers a variety of different cases, and when we use this word to refer to one of these cases, we gloss over the differences between them, push them all into the same mold. Zarathustra isn't suggesting that there is anything wrong with that. On the contrary, in many places he talks about it in a positive way, seeing it as one of the ways in which consciousness can master nature. But he warns us to be aware of it, and not let ourselves be molded in such a way. If you have a virtue, you will find that other people have a virtue similar to yours. But it isn't exactly the same, and if you use the word commonly used to describe this type of virtue, you will cede power over it to society. You should therefore refrain from naming it, and maintain its and your uniqueness.
Thus speak and stammer, that is my good, that do I love, thus doth it please me entirely, thus only do I desire the good. Not as the law of a god do I desire it, not as a human law or a human need do I desire it. It is not to be a guidepost for me to super-earths and paradises. An earthly virtue is it which I love, little prudence is therein, and the least everyday wisdom. But that bird built its nest beside me, therefore I love and cherish it. Now sitteth it beside me on its golden eggs. Thus shouldst thou stammer and praise thy virtue.
Your virtue comes from your own individual nature, and not from anywhere else. However, when you allow your virtue to be named, you tie it to a universal logic, and this logic usually leads you to think in the way the herd thinks. That is, that virtues are a gift from God, and that they lead you to a paradise that is beyond this world. But if you refuse to allow it to be named, it keeps you grounded to the earth. It then becomes something that makes your earthly life better.
Once hadst thou passions and calledst them evil, but now hast thou only thy virtues, they grew out of thy passions. Thou implantedst thy highest aim into the heart of those passions, then became they thy virtues and joys. And though thou wert of the race of the hot-tempered, or of the voluptuous, or of the fanatical, or the vindictive, all thy passions in the end became virtues, and all thy devils angels. Once hadst thou wild dogs in thy cellar, but they changed at last into birds and charming songstresses. Out of thy poisons brewedst thou balsam for thyself, thy cow, affliction, milkedst thou, now drinketh thou the sweet milk of her udder.
Now we are circling back to the discussion about the body. The body is the driving force, and one of its expressions are the passions. Previously we said that the body evolved over millions of years, and therefore knows what's good for you, so the passions are a good and healthy thing. However, the passions can drive you to do evil to others. This is why many moral systems tell us that we should repress the passions. Zarathustra rejects this solution. Instead of repressing them, you should direct them towards good. When you direct yourself towards your highest aim, and recruit your passions in its pursuit, they get sublimated in the process. They are still the thing that drives you, but instead of being harmful to others, they bring blessing to the world. They become virtues. Instead of learning your virtues from society, then, Zarathustra preaches that you should do it by shaping and sublimating your own inner forces.
And nothing evil groweth in thee any longer, unless it be the evil that groweth out of the conflict of thy virtues. My brother, if thou be fortunate, then wilt thou have one virtue and no more. Thus goest thou easier over the bridge. Illustrious is it to have many virtues, but a hard lot. And many a one hath gone into the wilderness and killed himself, because he was weary of being the battle and battlefield of virtues.
We've heard this before as well. Zarathustra reiterates his view that it is best to have just one virtue, which you develop and it takes you higher and higher. When you have more than one, your virtues might fight each other and prevent you from growing.
My brother, are war and battle evil? Necessary, however, is the evil. Necessary are the envy and the distrust and the backbiting among the virtues. Lo, how each of thy virtues is covetous of the highest place. It wanteth thy whole spirit to be its herald. It wanteth thy whole power in wrath, hatred, and love. Jealous is every virtue of the others, and a dreadful thing is jealousy. Even virtues may succumb by jealousy. He whom the flame of jealousy encompasseth turneth at last, like the scorpion, the poisoned sting against himself. Ah, my brother, hast thou never seen a virtue backbite and stab itself? Man is something that hath to be surpassed, and therefore shalt thou love thy virtues, for thou wilt succumb by them. Thus spake Zarathustra.
The war between the virtues isn't a bad thing when we talk about humanity as a whole. When they battle each other, they force each other to become stronger, and humanity becomes stronger as a result. This is how we get to the Superman. However, when it is one man who has several virtues, and the battlefield is in his own spirit, it can lead to his destruction. Or maybe the individual can figure out a way to make this work in his favor as well. We shall have to see if we get an answer on that. In any case, Zarathustra tells us to love our virtues. They take us higher, and even if we have to succumb to them, it is the kind of demise that clears the way to the Superman.